Welcome to the fabulous Las Vegas Rotary Club. For this Rotary year, President Barry Rassin asks us to be people of action and to be the inspiration. This club's mission of teaching youth to succeed through literacy, education, and life skills development is the inspiration that President Rassin asks of us, and the numerous local and international projects that we participate and support are the action that he asked us to take. My name is Jim Kohl, and I thank you for giving me the honor and the privilege of serving as the 96th president of the best Rotary Club in the world. Thank you. As we do every week at this time, if you have a cell phone and you're on Facebook, I ask that you share our live video feed so the rest of the world can see what we're up to and why we are, in fact, the best Rotary Club in the world. On this day in 1777, near the British-occupied city of Philadelphia, Patriot forces under General George Washington attempted an early morning attack on Sir William Howe's British troops in Germantown, which is now actually part of Philadelphia. Washington was repulsed, but at heavy cost to both English and American troops. In 1947, Sputnik was launched, starting the space age. And in 1965, Pope John Paul VI arrived at Kennedy International Airport in New York City. He was the first visit of a reigning pope to the United States. Just so you know, I'd like to die peacefully like my grandfather did, not screaming and yelling at the passengers in his car. At this time, Arlene, if you could come on up.
Deb was supposed to do the invocation today, but she had to stay at the office, so she asked that I do it. Let us pause and remember that God, who made heaven and earth, also created us. He blessed each of us with a variety of gifts and talents. Because we are members of a community, we are called to use those gifts to help build up our community. There are different forms of service which require time, talent, and treasure. May we use these wisely in the spirit of Rotary.
Thank you. Marie Walsh.
Because our country is in such a turmoil at this time, I would like to sing God Bless America so that God does bless us. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you. Before the pledge, if you could just join me in a moment of silence to remember all the victims of the October 1st massacre that occurred here in Las Vegas. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Thank you. Please be seated. Do you have the microphone? Yes. As we go through the introduction of our visitors and guests, I ask that you please hold your applause until everybody has been introduced. Mr. Warner, Bob, we have an international guest today.
We certainly do. Of course, we always have our standby Murray from Canada. You want to say a couple of words?
I'm only going to say 2 words. I left Saturday and they got 15 inches of snow on Sunday. So am I happy to be here? Yes.
He's going to have the hockey game. The Flyers going to get beat. He don't like the Flyers anyways.
You don't like the Flyers? Okay. Well, we'll have words later because I'm from Philadelphia.
Okay, now we're going to go to Austria. Dietmar from Austria with his friend Carl. He's going to say a few words.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for giving us the chance to participate in your lunch meeting. I'm here on business. We just launched a new total inventory liquor inventory management solution. So those of you who are in the hospitality industry, I would like to connect. I'm here until tomorrow, and I'm so happy. It's so warm. And when I left home, we also got some inches of snow. So God bless America.
Thank you and welcome.
And I would like to introduce my friend Karl. Karl is from Austria, just a couple of blocks away from my home. But he decided to move to America decades ago and finally ended up here in Las Vegas.
Welcome.
We're going to make him a Rotarian in our club. Here, I'm going to give Dietmar a flag to take home.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Dietmar.
Thank you. Welcome. If you are a visiting Rotarian, would you please raise your hand? Visiting Rotarians.
Hello. I know at least a third of you guys and ladies. David Young, lived here 7 years, moved back to Denver 4 years ago. I'm now a member of the Denver Southeast Rotary Club. Pleasure to see you all.
Welcome. Visiting Rotarian. Visiting Rotarians.
Good afternoon. 1 1 2 1 2.
It's on. You just have to talk.
Oh, into it. Oh, there we go. Thank you. My name is Walt Parrish. I'm from Fresno, in the Fresno Club, which is a little bit bigger than yours by about 100 people.
Oh, wow.
Well, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Visiting Rotarians. Do we have any more visiting Rotarians? Do we have guests of Rotarians? Could you please raise your hand if you have a guest today?
Folks, I would want to make a comment about Walt Parrish. He's moving from Fresno to Las Vegas, hopes to be a member of this club, and he understands military protocol, so you are welcome, sir. I'm going to come over here and introduce Shell Goldberg and his wife Barbara. They've been attending several weeks, and they are extremely interested in both of them being members, so we're going to fill out the paperwork today and submit it to the membership committee. This is Shell Goldberg and Barbara.
Welcome. Welcome back.
And not to be outdone, Pierre, stand up, please. This is Pierre Ramos. Pierre Ramos. He is a native of Nevada. He is in the commercial real estate business. Prime Commercial is the name of his company. They're a boutique company. And he is also interested. It was interesting that Shell introduced me to Pierre, so we've got some good connections going here. Welcome, Pierre, and we'll be talking. Thank you.
Welcome. Further guests?
There it is. I'd just like to introduce my wife, Tiffany Gamero. She is my reason for meeting you all, native of Las Vegas, and just happy to be here today. Thank you.
Welcome. Do we have other guests? If you have a guest, please raise your hand.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Steve Newey. He's with the Ferrari race team, checking out our club. So,
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Other visitors?
I'm pleased to introduce our guest to the club is Corey Fagen from First Friday.
Welcome. Do we have other guests this time? Okay, I'll go ahead and introduce the head table. Seated directly across from me is Tina Bishop. She was a political speechwriter in the 60s and didn't particularly care for it, so she realized her favorite class was geology, and her hobby was making jewelry, so she went into her current profession. She likes everything social, including restaurants, theater, entertaining. She hasn't changed much. She was social chairman in her high school in charge of booking bands and planning dances, and she runs a group of over 100 people where they meet up 4 times each month. The latest event was a Kenny G concert, which was quite nice, and I believe I saw that up on Facebook, so excellent. And when she was a teenager, she began to drive, and her parents restricted her travel to 2 miles, so apparently that had a negative effect on her because she has posted to date over 2.5 million air miles. Seated next to her is Cindy Tjeerdema. Did I get that right? Tjeerdema. And Cindy is Tina's sister and also is the wife of Ron Tjeerdema, who is our speaker, who will be more formally introduced by Tina. Could you join me for a round of applause for all of our visiting Rotarians, guests, and the head table. Today is the first week of October, and so we have a birthday table. Could we take the microphone over to the birthday table, please? Jamie?
Happy birthday. Should we start? Oh. All right, Miss Joan.
I'm Joan Murdoch. I joined Rotary in September of 1987, so I've been 31 years a Rotarian in 4 different clubs, and I'll be 82 on the 30th.
Ooh, congratulations.
Oh, we're just doing as ladies first. Oh, I'm a lady today. That's pretty good. Well, I'm Janet Linder, and my birthday is October the 18th, and I've been a Rotarian for 19 years, and I'll be 71.
Congratulations.
How in the hell did I get here this fast? Okay, who's next?
Hello, I'm Bruce Frazee. I'm a 40-year Rotarian, Wichita, Kansas, Miami, Florida, and now my favorite club, the one in Las Vegas.
Thank you. I'm Brock Frazier. Been in the club for 22, 23 years. Las Vegas for 48 some odd years, and these 22 years have been the best years right here in this club. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom Wolfinger. Been a Rotarian, I guess back east for about 5 years in Londonderry, New Hampshire. Birthday is 10-4 today. I enjoy long walks on the beach. A Libra. That's about it. Thanks.
Oh, y'all aren't birthdays. Okay. Are there any other birthdays? Sean? It's your birthday month? What? And I'm not at the birthday table. But it is my birthday, and I am happy to be in Rotary for now 14 years.
And we are, I can say this from experience, we are truly, truly blessed to have Sean as part of our club.
Are there any other birthdays?
Nope, I think we're good. Sidra? Yep, there you are.
Okay, so join us all in singing happy birthday to the birthday folks over here. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you.
Okay, this time, Rosalee, can you join us in the front?
We'll just do that. You have everything for Rene? Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Hello? Shh. Rene, would you please come up so that we can do your induction? We're going to today induct Rene Romero into our club. Congratulations. Okay, so okay, so I'll read our script that we read to our new inductees. Fellow Rotarians and honored guests, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Las Vegas, it is my privilege to induct a new member today. Please allow me to introduce Rene Romero, and his sponsor is myself. You have been invited to membership, and our Rotary Club has accepted you as a person of good behavior, high ethical standards, and a person who has a heart of service and will represent our club in the Las Vegas and Rotary communities. We encourage you to learn all you can about Rotary and to actively participate in the opportunities that our club has to serve and those in need. Our Rotary motto, service above self, is the essence of our gathering. The members of the Rotary are people who believe that world understanding and peace can be improved through people united in the cause of service. Today, you are one of those people. We would like to extend to each of you, or to you, a sincere and healthy welcome to the Las Vegas Rotary Club and the Worldwide Fellowship of Rotary International. Please rise, everyone, if you would please, and welcome our newest Rotarian to our club.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Simply honored and humbled to be part of this club. Everyone's been very warm, inviting, and really interesting as well. So I know I'm in for a great ride. So thank you, and thank you to my wife for walking out of that meeting today. I hope it's worth it. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, I'd like to thank the Rotarians who helped today. Setup was Jaime Goldsmith and Chan Lam. Greeters were Carolyn Sparks and Chan Lam. Invocation was Arlene Sirois. Song leader was Marie Walsh. Teardown is Michael Williams, and a sergeant-at-arms is Jaime Goldsmith. Our photographer today is Jim Tucker, and tickets was John and Jimmy and Marie Walsh. This time we will break for fellowship. could you take the microphone over to Jackie Thornhill, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm here to report on our raffle results, and you all did awesome. We sold 261 total tickets. And with that, we raised a total of $26,100. And after expenses of $10,005, we netted $16,095. Congratulations.
Folks, this is the first time we've ever run this raffle, and that's just a home run. Congratulations.
Thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of you for stepping up, and as Jim and I wanted and hoped you would do, going to the outside to family, friends, and other people, and getting other people's money, which was our hope that you would do to help us brand the Las Vegas Rotary Club in our community and help us show the Las Vegas community what we do for our people outside of this room. So thank you once again. And there are some people I would like to especially thank. I'd like to thank Janice Lenke. I don't think she's here today. She is responsible for our showgirl greeters and our wonderful MC, Jennifer Lair. I'd like to thank her for that. I'd also like to thank Deb Granda. She, along with Sean, they managed the money, took care of the tickets, did the deposits, and did all of the accounting. So I'd like to have a nice round of applause for them, please. And lastly, in case it just went over some of your heads, last week we did not have the winner present, but guess what? Miss Corey Fagen is here with us today. So thanks all of you very much from the bottom of my heart for stepping up and helping us with our first annual fundraiser.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jamie, if you, could you take the microphone to yourself?
Who? Oh, to me?
Yes, wine to water.
Okay, so wine to water. Is Stu here? Stu should do the wine to water announcement.
Okay, Stu. Take it to Stu then.
I've even got a visual aid here if it'll work. Let's see. So first, I want to thank Jamie because she basically has put us on the track to try and do something a little bit different than we've done before. So this is our next scheduled event for November 15th, and it'll be held in the training room in Total Wine, which is down at Town Square. If probably seen it, it faces Las Vegas Boulevard right behind Fry's. So what we've arranged for $30 a person is a tour of American wines. It'll be conducted by the in-house sommelier at Total Wine, including some cheese and crackers with that, and also some Italian sub-sandwiches. You can sign up in the Green Book, and if you open up your wheel to the inside back page, you'll see this same ad there, and you'll note that there's a URL. You can do that from your cell phone right now, at home, anytime, or sometime between now and November 15th. So I hope a lot of people will come.
Thank you.
I'll be there for sure, drinking wine, maybe.
Could you take the microphone over to Maria Walsh, please?
Thank you. Tuesday, Breakfast with Books, which is the 9th. If you're coming, you need to be there by 7:30 because people start coming in just a few minutes after that. If you haven't signed up, please sign up in the Green Book. If you forget to sign up, it's fine if you just come along or come and send me an email and tell me you're coming. Even if you don't sign up, show up. I want everyone to show up. It's a wonderful thing. Come and enjoy the children. It is really wonderful. And I also want to make mention that the Harvest Festival is going to be on October 12th for Beckley children. If you would like to help, we would love to have you. You can send me an email, or I can put you in touch with a teacher at the school, but you can send me an email. And I just want to say, if you cannot show up that day, which is hard for everyone, could you bring some candy in next Thursday? And I will take it on Friday to the school, because we give out candy as prizes for the Fall Festival. So, I'm sorry? Cookies, anything. Cookies, candy, anything that you would give out for trick-or-treat. So when you're buying your trick-or-treat candy, think of the children at Beckley. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you take the microphone to Jim Hunt, please? Jim, by the way, welcome back from my hometown.
Thank you. Yeah, I was in Philadelphia for about 5. I'll pause and smile. For about 5 or 6 days, had a great time. Love Philly, great city. Except, not crazy about the football team, of course, but they deserved the win last year. They were wonderful. So, as we promised about 5 or 6 weeks ago, when it was 103, 104 degrees, that this was going to be a much different event at our cigar social by the time we got here on October 5th. Tomorrow night, it should be about in the mid-70s. Should be beautiful. If those of you who have never been to Tom and Jane Krob's beautiful home overlooking the 15th fairway at Tournament Players Course in Summerlin, you're missing out, and you don't want to miss out tomorrow night. We've got about 40 people signed up already. We're going to have some appetizers. We ask you to always bring 3 cigars if you smoke cigars, 1 to give to the troops, 1 to exchange, and 1 to smoke. If you don't smoke cigars, that's fine. We have room inside where appetizers will be. It's really just a great social where we raise a little bit of money for our foundation, and it should be a lot of fun. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, if you haven't signed up, see me or sign up on the board. Bring your friends. They're all welcome. And want to also mention, thanks to Arlene Sirois for donating a humidor that she won last time back to us. We also have another humidor that holds, I think, 300 cigars that we'll be raffling off. So we'll have some raffle prizes that we've got in addition to that. If any of you want to bring any kind of a cigar humidor or a cutter or a lighter for us to raffle off tomorrow night, by all means, bring that as well. We'll look forward to seeing you. It's going to be a great night. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Right behind you, if you could give the microphone to Lucy.
Hi, guys. Just a quick update on the canned food drive and the Halloween party. The date has been confirmed for Friday, October 26th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I'm sorry, from 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. For this meeting, we have a separate clipboard going around. On the first page, there's the sign-up sheet for the actual event, and then there's also pages 2 and 3. The second page is for the help setup. We would need some volunteers to show up Friday around 4:30, just to kind of help put out the decorations, lay out some spider webs, make it all Halloween-y. And then the third page is for volunteers to help clean up after the event. It's going to be a fun event. There's going to be we're going to do a Chinese raffle just like last year. So if there's anybody that has any items that they'd like to donate for the raffle, we would very much appreciate that. And there's also going to be a Halloween contest, and there's going to be a fun prize for whoever wins the Halloween contest. So if the sign-up sheet's going around, Bob has it right now. So if you guys have any questions or anything, let me know. There's also the sign-up sheet for the canned food drive going around in the green binder. Anything you could donate would be perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would you take the microphone over to Russ Swain, please?
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and guests. We have a really busy October. And guess what I'm going to announce? The UNLV tailgate is coming up October 19th at 5 p.m. It's a Friday night game, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock for us that are working and setting up, 5 o'clock for most of you folks that are going to come out and enjoy a meal. Anil is going to bring out and cater the event, and I'll have the RV out there. We're in the Scarlet parking lot, which is on the west side of the stadium up against the fence. So come on out, have some fun. Remember, it's a Friday game this year, not a Saturday. So Friday at 5. What's that? And we play Air Force. Go Rebels. Hey. Thanks for letting me be of service.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for our announcements. Thank you so much. Now is everybody's favorite time, the raffle. The pot is up to $2,910 plus today's take, and the ticket to draw for a chance to win is 681-4279. 4279. Six 4279. Anybody? 681-4279. Last call for 4279. Okay, we'll draw again. Thank you. Okay, 681-4286. 4286. Congratulations. Yes, for Ace, he gets $50. Take this over to Sean, and then she'll whip it up. Oh, we take the $10 back too? Yeah. Congratulations. That's great. Okay, for the Lowry's bucks, 681-4100. 4100. Okay, if you have the green book, if you could keep that circulating, we'd greatly appreciate it. And at this time, I'd like to invite Tina Bishop up to more formally introduce our speaker.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I'll do this quickly so that we can get right into the speaker. I want to introduce Dr. Ron Tjeerdema to you. He is Associate Dean, Environmental Sciences at UC Davis in California. He lives in Napa Valley with my sister. They're married. My sister Cindy. They have 3 boys, wonderful, my only nephews, so I appreciate that. I want to say that I have known Ron for not quite, but almost 47 years, something in that neighborhood, when Cindy invited him to the Sadie Hawkins dance in high school, and they pretty much have been together since. He told me at dinner last night he has never been to Las Vegas. This is his first time. He drove by, and I think we calculated that at 40 years ago, something like that. He drove by. I was living in Colorado at the time, and he came to pick up my sister to make her his bride. So he is an expert in environmental toxicology and was involved in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill and the aftermath, which he's going to talk to us about today. So, Ron, turn this over to you. Oh, excuse me, Dr. Ron. Got a little familiar there.
Thank you, Tina. Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me here today, and thank Tina for inviting me as well. Closer? Okay. I'm not used to using a microphone. Usually when I teach a class, I have a booming voice, and I don't use it, but I will use it today. So what I'd like to do is give you a little synopsis of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. It's one of the areas that I work in. I also work in the area of pesticide fate and effects in the environment, but that's for another day. How many of you remember the Deepwater Horizon oil spill? Perfect. Right. Yeah. You know, when I teach a freshman class, and they're looking younger every year, they don't always know because, you know, we're looking at them being maybe 8 or 10 years old. Is there a clicker here, or do I use the... I can just hit the button. And so, oh, that actually moved. Let me go back. So it's interesting in that often when I try to talk to freshmen about this, I have to really go back to the beginning and tell them what's going on. The neat thing about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, even though it was an environmental disaster, is it was on TV. How many of you saw the wellhead gushing oil every day on CNN? Thank you. And that probably was the first time we had an environmental disaster unfolding in front of you minute by minute. Okay, and so let me go back and kind of give you a summary of what happened, a little bit of behind the scenes information, probably a few things you didn't know about, and kind of where things are at today. Okay, so the well blew out on April 20th, 2010. Don't you know, the one time I need my, there it goes. 2010. Oh, this is just like a lecture. Yeah, you know, the clicker, the pointer works and then it doesn't work. Okay, let me back up. Deepwater Horizon was a drilling well. It was not a production well. And when they were drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, they hit a fairly large pocket of methane. And the methane rushed through the pipe a mile below the surface of the ocean and hit the wellhead and ignited and blew up. And when it did, one of the things that was sort of lost in the shuffle with the disaster occurring for months on end is that 11 people died. That was one of the big tragedies early on. How many of you saw the movie? Okay, a few of you. All right. The Deepwater Horizon movie that was out about 2 years ago. I was in Florida with visiting my son-in-law at the time, and the two of us went on a Friday afternoon. I guess the movie had been out a while. He and I went to the movie theater and got in and sat down in the middle, up at the top. Only 2 people in the theater, the entire movie. So I think it was on its way out at the point. Anyway, the movie focused on the disaster. Okay, it didn't focus on the explosion, not the later disaster environmentally. So when it blew out, it took several days, but ultimately, here we go again. Ultimately, the platform capsized. And that was the real sort of environmental problem, is that when the platform capsized, it dropped into a mile down into the ocean. It broke the riser pipe that went from the bottom of the ocean to the platform. And when that ruptured, that's when the oil started spewing out uncontrollably at the rate of about 2 million gallons a day. And that was the problem, is that you saw on CNN that very gush of oil coming out. Now, I should mention one of the things that nobody was aware of at the time. The wellhead had a well cap on it. That's right. Oh, there we go. The wellhead had a well cap on it that had 3 fail-safe shutoffs. All 3 failed. Okay, one of the keys there, and this was a problem at the time, is that they installed it knowing none of those fail-safes worked. The trouble is that there's 3,000 wells in the Gulf of Mexico today, and we don't know how many of them now have wellheads that also are not capable of working. Many of them were installed defective, and I'll come back to that. And so we had a gush of oil, essentially, that we couldn't control. It came about 45 miles off of the mouth of the Mississippi River. And important to know is that because of the clockwise circulation of the Gulf of Mexico, the oil, when it reached the surface, started to move north in the clockwise direction following the Gulf. And that was a real big concern. 2 reasons. Because when it went to the shorelines, it had an economic impact because the Gulf of Mexico is a very big shrimping industry down there. They also have a very big oyster industry down there. And most, if not all of us, have enjoyed both shrimp and oysters from the Gulf of Mexico. And so with that clockwise move up along the coast, the likelihood was that this oil was literally going to turn the beaches into more or less asphalt parking lots. Not only that, you also had a number of wildlife refuges, etc. These were spawning grounds for fish. They were mating grounds and so forth for marine mammals, birds, pelicans, and so forth. So you had a lot of potential for damage along the Gulf Coast. All right, so when there's an oil spill, the Coast Guard takes charge. They are the on-scene coordinators. They run the show. It's usually an admiral. Everybody else is under the direction of the Coast Guard. The idea is that the U.S. EPA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration assist the Coast Guard, but ultimately the folks responsible for the spill are the spillers themselves, and in this case, BP Oil. They're the ones responsible for having all the methods in place, the equipment in place, etc., so that they deal with the oil. They pay the costs directly. Anything that we do, EPA, Coast Guard, etc., is billed back to them. So ultimately, the industry is totally responsible. So when there's a spill, initially, you have to make a couple of decisions. You can do nothing. Nothing simply means leave it. And sometimes that works. For instance, off the west coast of the U.S., if there's a major oil spill and it's blowing out further to sea and there are no big resources that it's going to threaten, we'll let it go. Because nature ultimately breaks down an oil spill. Most of that oil will either evaporate. As you know, oil contains gasoline and other very volatile hydrocarbons, broken down by sunlight. The rest of the oil in water, for the most part, is broken down by bacteria in the water, but it takes a bit of time for that to happen. If, on the other hand, oil is moving closer to shore and there are valuable resources that you want to protect, then you want to do something. And the next question is, first off, what are the resources? And I just mentioned a couple along the Gulf Coast. And what are the potential mechanisms or methods that you can use to deal with that spill? All right? And you might remember this from the news at the time. One of the first things they did is they tried burning the oil, right? Oil is flammable, at least when it's fresh. The longer it sits, the less flammable it is. They tried burning it. It didn't burn very efficiently, number one. Number two, it takes one problem and turns it into another problem, as you can see by the heavy smoke here, right? It goes from being a water issue to being an air issue, air quality issue. And so early on, they quite realized that that wasn't going to solve the problem. Now let me back up for a second. You're dealing with 2 million gallons of oil coming out a day. The Exxon Valdez spill was something on the order of 10 or 11 million gallons total. Okay, it was a finite tanker. It only had so much oil in it. This was like sticking a spigot into the ground, and it was basically unlimited. You could have oil coming out for months, if not years, if you weren't careful. And so it was a bigger problem. All right, the next thing you can do is you can try booming it and skimming it. And in short, what that means is that you put some sort of a barrier around the oil, and this is kind of a floating plastic barrier, and then you take a ship called a skimmer or a boat called a skimmer, and to, long story short, you're literally mowing the lawn, okay? You're keeping the oil in an area, and then you're skimming back and forth, and you're trying to pick the oil up. If you don't have the barrier, oil will continue to spread and expand indefinitely. So it'd be like mowing a lawn that keeps expanding in size. You never finish, right? And the trouble with this is that the oil industry did not have enough skimmers in the Gulf. There were not enough skimmers in the entire world to deal with this amount of oil coming out of the ground, because they never anticipated that there would be a well break. There's 3,000 wells out there. Why didn't they anticipate it? They should have. Finally, the only real resolution was to hit the oil with dispersant. And dispersants are detergents. They're very much like Dawn dishwashing liquid, etc. And they very much break the oil up just like you break grease up when you wash your dishes. Or when you scrub your skin, etc., they break up oils. And they work the same way in water. Now, they're not a perfect solution, but they were the only thing that we had in enough supply to deal with the spill. Now, the real solution was to, anybody want to guess what the real solution was? Plug the pipe, cap the well, right? You got to stop the outflow, or it's never going to go away. But in the meantime, because they had to develop a system for actually drilling down and shutting off the pipe, that took time. They decided they had to at least try to disperse the oil. And here, for instance, they're dropping dispersant, and the dispersant takes and it breaks the oil into tinier droplets, and it pushes those droplets into the water column. And when that happens, then bacteria are more capable of breaking it down because they're finer and finer particles that they can now chew. Well, this gives you an idea what happens. You get a mid-water cloud that forms, so that's not on the surface anymore. It's about 30 meters down. And the idea there is that you get it off the surface if you're worried about marine mammals and birds, and you move it into the water column where now it's going to impact fish. Now, one of the key things about an environmental situation like this, and one that we had to deal with, is that you can't clean up the oil. It's going to be there for a while. Nature really is the only thing that cleans it up, sunlight and bacteria. The only thing you can really do is move it somewhere. And you have a choice. In this case, you could either let it flow to the surface and let the current take it to the Gulf Coast and cause all the environmental damage that you're going to have on the Gulf Coast, or you could continue to disperse it with detergent and drop it into the water column and keep it off the beaches. There was no other solution. It was just a matter of where do we put it until it breaks down. That was not an ideal situation, but that was the best we had. Well, that's just me in my younger days showing how dispersion works for a newscast. Okay, so we tried aerial application for a long time, which is typically what you do. It didn't work very well because by the time the oil comes up from a mile below the surface, it's quite cold. It's already moosey, which means it turns into this thick stuff, kind of like what you drain out of your car, or worse. And it doesn't disperse anymore. No matter how much detergent you get on it, it won't disperse. So quite quickly, we realized this wasn't going to work. And so ultimately, the Coast Guard, the on-scene coordinator, decided to try something different, and that was to inject the dispersant at the wellhead. So how many of you remember this picture of the wellhead flowing out, and you had an injector right here? And quite literally what they were doing is that they were injecting detergent right where the oil came out of the ground. Now, the oil's coming out of the ground at very high speed and turbulence, and it's very hot, 100 degrees Celsius, which is about the boiling point of water. And that means that you're going to get much better mixing of the detergent into the oil. Okay, just simple chemistry, the hotter, the better it mixes. And so that way, a lot, if not most of this oil never reaches the surface because it mixes and disperses in the water column, but much more effectively. Never been done before, and it was difficult for us as decision makers. I was part of a 40-scientist panel that had to provide on-the-spot advice to the Coast Guard. Never been done before, so we didn't know the consequences because nobody had done any research on this, surprisingly again. All right. One of the things that we found that happened in this subsurface dispersal is that instead of getting the classical beaches are all oiled and everybody's out there, raking it up and throwing adsorbents and straw and everything else on it and try to clean beaches up that are sort of plastered, instead what we ended up with was a situation like this. And we saw these sorts of news reports coming out of CNN where you'd have a reporter walking on the beach and the reporter was having a hard time finding oil. And they'd find droplets here or there, and they were about the size of, smaller than a foot, and occasionally everywhere. And what we had done as a decision-making group by going with this subsea injection was to keep this from happening, to keep the oil from going to the beaches, because that was one possibility, and instead keep it in the water column and eventually have it drop into the water column, and just occasional oil globs made it to the coastline. So much so that after the spill was capped in late July of 2010, I had an AP reporter who I'd been talking to quite a bit call me one day. He was stuck in traffic in New Orleans, and he calls me one day on his cell phone because he had nothing else to do, and he said, "Is this the disaster that never happened?" And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Because we expected a Prince William Sound, Exxon Valdez situation with oil all over the beaches." He says, "It's not there." And I said, "Well, I kind of predicted that when it first started, when we first talked." I said, "The Gulf of Mexico is a very warm climate. The water's warm, the air's warm, the sunlight's intense." I said, "If you disperse the oil early on, between sunlight breakdown and bacterial breakdown, you're not going to see much oil. It's going to break down efficiently at the surface, but you will have some plumes in the deep sea area." Again, you move it from one place to the other, you have a choice. The benefit was to keep it off the beach. The cost was we ended up with some of it in the deep sea area. There was no perfect solution here. We only could move it to one place or another. All right. We have a group at UC Davis that focuses in the vet school on cleaning up and rehabilitating birds and mammals, and they were down there, and they only actually ended up rehabilitating a couple of hundred birds, pelicans, etc., and very few marine mammals, again, because we kept it off the coastline. And that's considering that the amount of total oil that came out of the wellhead before it was capped was about 200 million gallons. Prince William Sound, Exxon Valdez, in Alaska, the total was 12 million gallons. I said 11 earlier, 12 million gallons. And they had a much bigger wildlife hit than we did in the Gulf. Well, we are finding plumes, and we still find plumes in the deep sea. Again, it was the trade-off. Keep it off the beach, but now it's going to be in the water column. But one of the things to consider is that the Gulf of Mexico, as an oil-producing area, has a tremendous number of natural oil seeps. So you have 40 million or so gallons of oil naturally going into the Gulf every year because of these seeps. And so the amount of oil that's in the deep sea, in part, is from what's left over the spill, and in part is what's from these oil seeps. Now, it's difficult to define the two because we weren't closely looking at the fingerprint of the two types of oil before the spill. Now we're really looking at it closely, but we don't have a lot of information prior to the spill to compare what we now know. All right. The other thing I should mention is that the other benefit of, there's actually a benefit of having these oil seeps. The other benefit of having these oil seeps is that they've been around for millions of years. And because of that, they've naturally selected for bacteria in the Gulf that are capable of literally digesting oil as an energy source. They can live on oil hydrocarbons by digesting them. And you don't get this everywhere around the world. You get it in areas where you've got natural oil seeps. Santa Barbara Channel, for instance, same thing. And so the bacteria that are in the Gulf are already sort of powered up to live on oil. And so that also, along with sunlight, worked to our advantage. Now, one of the interesting things that occurred during the spill is that we had a situation where most, if not all, of the government scientists could not talk to the media. Folks at NOAA, folks at EPA, even Coast Guard, they had official spokespersons, but the scientists couldn't talk, the ones that were actually doing most of the research. And at that point in time, I was one of only a half a dozen or so academics that had been working extensively on dispersants and oil spill issues at that point for over 20 years. And so my phone was ringing off the hook. And in addition to my advising that you would see the oil disappear from the surface fairly quickly and degrade fairly rapidly, I said, have you ever looked up Ixtoc-1? And early on, the AP reporter said, no, what's an Ixtoc-1? And I said, well, Google it. Right, nowadays you can get everything online. And I said, Google it, because it was a spill that occurred in 1979 in the Gulf of Campeche down here. It was a well blowout. And I remember when this happened, I was an undergraduate in college, and I remember seeing the news reports every day. We didn't have the continuous monitoring of the wellhead back then. But I said, take a look at that, because it was a very similar spill. Because BP Oil kept saying, well, this had never happened before, so we weren't prepared for the cleanup. Well, in reality, it had happened before. And Ixtoc-1 blew out in 1979 and flowed for 10 months, which is quite a bit longer than ultimately our spill lasted. And in doing so, remember the clockwise flow. In doing so, that oil went up to the Gulf of Texas as far as almost Houston. Now, two things here. One is that the oil industry was wrong. This had happened before, so they should have been prepared for a spill like this. This was not a new thing, and they weren't. The second is that if you go down and you talk to the ecologists and other scientists that have looked at the aftermath of the Ixtoc-1 spill, they don't find many signs of it left. It's pretty much recovered along the coast of Mexico. Again, the reason for that is the Gulf of Mexico is a warm climate, and it has intense sunlight, and oil tends to break down fairly readily in that kind of an environment. And so what we're seeing now today, and it's been 8 years, the signs of the oil spill and the ramifications in terms of damage along the Gulf Coast are relatively difficult to find. Scientists can still find them, but they really have to look pretty hard. The main area that they look right now is deep sea in terms of these plumes. And that's because we had to make a choice between sort of two bad possibilities, the lesser of the two evils being to keep it below the surface instead of letting it go to the coast. All right. Future considerations for new spills, because we've learned a lot. One of the key things we learned, and wasn't apparent at the time, was that you really need a government agency to regulate the oil industry appropriately so this sort of thing doesn't happen. If it does happen, you've got the resources in place. Now, at the time, the Minerals Management Service was regulating the oil industry. But they were too close to the oil industry, and they really weren't regulating them. And so what happened is that when the spill occurred, the resources were not in place, as I mentioned before, to deal with a spill of this magnitude. And so there was this scrambling. I don't know if you remember the top hat idea of trying to put this cover over the spill. That didn't work. And they really had to wait until they could drill 2 wells, lateral wells, and actually cement in that original well, which occurred in late July. And so you had oil spewing until then. The amount of oil that came out from this spill matched that from Ixtoc-1. One of the things that happened personally for me is that I got phoned by all the lawyers. I was phoned twice by BP Oil, who really wanted me on their team. I got phoned by Nalco, who makes the dispersant. I got phoned by the U.S. Department of Justice, who wanted me on their side. And because there was enough blame to go around, the federal government was at fault, the oil industry was at fault. They were both at fault. And because as an academic, had I signed on to either side, I could no longer speak publicly, and part of my goal was to educate the public. I said no, and I probably now don't have a Porsche today because of that, but it was the right decision. I just didn't feel like I could defend either side because they were both at fault, and they both had to go and they had to settle, which they eventually did. They actually settled a couple of years ago. And so, as I mentioned, inadequate resources on hand, etc. And the future response for any new spill needs to be based on both sound science. They need to understand how best to respond and have the resources in place. Now, since the spill, the media has been looking at it quite closely. They've been interviewing a lot of us in the area to find out what are the best ways to deal with spills in the future. What are the impacts going to be? How do we make decisions as to where we allow oil to go and where we try to keep it from going? Because again, as I mentioned before, you can't clean up oil. You can move it and let nature clean it up, but you can't clean it up yourself very well. And we can help nature, but we can't do it ourselves. You can't go out with a vacuum cleaner and remove it. These skimmers, when they skim, they pick up 98% water and a little bit of oil. And so they have to go back on shore all the time and dump off all that water and oil and go back out. So unless you could have had 1,000 skimmers in the Gulf, it wouldn't have helped. The other thing we're doing is we're updating our knowledge base of what's going on. And I'm on a National Academy of Sciences panel right now, which actually this week we're just signing off on the chapters. But we've been working for about 2 years to update what we know about dispersants and how they're used in oil spills. And in that regards, then, we're going to be publishing within the next 6 months an updated new guidebook that the oil industry, as well as responders, etc., can use to get not only an updated idea of the science behind dispersants and their use on spills, but also an update on other techniques and methodologies to use on spills, as well as an update on the ramifications, environmental damage, etc., that spills cause. Let me just say in final that one of the biggest problems with oil spills, and it's actually a good thing and a bad thing, they don't happen very often, right? I remember when I was a kid, tankers were grounding all the time and breaking open. You had oil spills pretty regularly. We don't see tankers or pipelines break to this magnitude very often anymore. And that's because technology is much better. We're much more on it these days. When they do, they can be catastrophic. Now, developing new skimmers and new dispersants and new technologies, etc., requires a market for it. Well, there isn't really a market for it because these spills happen so irregularly that you could produce 1 million gallons of oil dispersant and you'll end up stockpiling it for 20 years until there's a spill. You can't make money. You're not going to make a profit. So there's no real good market for this type of technology. And again, that's where regulation comes in, because as a side cost of producing oil and producing gas and gasoline and so forth, we have to require both federal and state agencies as well as the oil industry to partner together to put these things in place, because otherwise the market won't push them to do it. And with that, I think I'll stop. So. Okay. I'm told I have time for one question. Yes, you raised your hand first.
One question here, but 2 questions.
All right.
Can you give us an idea of the time frame that you said that nature will disperse the oil without the...
right.
And then
without the dispersant?
Right.
Right, okay.
And so the different time frames, and then the plumes that are still out there from this, are those affecting the deep water fish and effects of those out there?
Okay, yeah. Short answers on both. If you let it naturally disperse, it probably would have taken months to years. And if you have the plumes deep sea, there are critters and organisms down there as well, certainly affecting them as well. The economic importance is probably less so. Ecologically can be argued. And so it's not a perfect world. And again, when we were trying to decide which way to go, it was the lesser of 2 evils, but we wished we didn't have to do either. So, Do I have time for one more?
I guess there is time for one more.
All right, go ahead.
Not sure how to make this work. So quickly, beating the oil and gas exploration and production business, I do have an interest.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah.
Brilliant idea about putting
Hello?
the dispersant in at the wellhead.
Right, right.
I assume the water down there is quite cold.
Exactly, 4 degrees Celsius.
So that would cool off the 100 degrees Celsius oil that's coming out of the wellhead down there.
Right.
And at that lower temperature, does this dispersant still work, or was it a custom designed dispersant to work based on the water temperature and the situation?
And that's a very good question. And the answer to that is that because of the marketplace, not the best dispersant necessarily. The oil industry stockpiles dispersant in Phoenix. Okay? Anybody know why? Do you know why? Okay. Not nice and warm so much, but because it's equidistant from the Gulf and the West Coast. And so if planes have to respond, they can go one direction or the other. So it's efficient, right? Yes.
My brother was one of the pilots who flew.
Really?
And he was on a field.
Ah, okay, yeah. See, that's why. The other is that I noticed when they first started treating the oil, they were treating with a product called Core Exit 9527, made by Exxon. Exxon's the big producer of these things. Core Exit 9527 in 2010 had not been used for 15 years. And they actually had a newer dispersant called Core Exit 9500, which was the current one to use. Well, early on, they used up all their 9527 first, which wasn't necessarily designed for this kind of a spill, because it had been stockpiled for many years and they wanted to get some value out of it. So they used it up. And then they switched to 9500 and they used that afterwards. A better dispersant, but again, not necessarily well designed for that type of situation. Temperature, yes, because we treat in the Arctic. But pressure, no. We weren't planning to treat a mile down. So.
Thank you very much. As we do with all of our speakers, I'd like to present you with a Share What You Can award, and we will donate a meal to a needy veteran in your name. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us. Really fascinating topic. Thank you. So we need a picture. Okay, we're running a little long, so I'm just going to say meeting adjourned.